Good evening and welcome to Lightning Talks. I'm Jim Wharton. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the Vice President for Conservation Engagement and Learning here at the Aquarium. Now we're coming to you live from the Seattle Aquarium on the shores of Puget Sound in the traditional and contemporary territories of the Coast Salish people. We thank you for joining us tonight from wherever you call home. Now our topic for this evening is rays. Now rays is shorthand for a group of fishes closely related to sharks that include animals like stingrays and manta rays, but also sawfishes and skates and wedge fishes. All in all, there are more than 600 species of rays. In fact, there are more species of rays than of sharks. Now on the inside, sharks and rays are remarkably similar, but they come in very different packages. Most are what scientists would call smooshed flat. Now that makes it really easy to hide on the bottom or soar through the blue. Now there are many important local and commercial fisheries for rays, and unfortunately that's led to some species being counted among the most threatened animals in the ocean. As usual, we have 5 great speakers tonight to tell us more. Now, if you never attended a Lightning Talks event before, here's what you have in store. 5 speakers have 5 minutes each to share one big idea and not 1 second more. They'll get warnings at 1 minute, at 30 seconds, and then at time. And if they go over, they'll get this. Now, we like to keep things moving, so we won't be stopping after each speaker for questions. But if you have questions or comments, please do put those into the chat. And at the end of the evening, we'll be bringing all of our speakers back to the Lightning Talk stage for a Q&A conversation. So if you enjoy what you see tonight and would like to support the Seattle Aquarium, please do consider a donation. When you donate to the Seattle Aquarium, you're joining us in our mission of inspiring conservation of our marine environment. And if you haven't yet, please do click like and subscribe. Now, we've got a great program, and I'm excited to get started. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Kim Bassos-Hull. Now, Kim is a researcher at Mote Marine Laboratory in Sarasota, Florida, who studies both dolphins through the Sarasota Dolphin Research Program and eagle rays through the Shark and Ray Conservation Program. But tonight, she'll be sticking to rays. Now, Kim, are you ready to kick us off?
I am ready.
All right. Slides look great. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks, Seattle Aquarium, Jim and team, for the opportunity to talk about our research on eagle rays. And I'm actually going to give you a little scoop on our devil ray research too. I'm coming to you from the west coast of Florida, about 3,000 miles away. So here we go. Let's see. It is not advanced. There we go. So the 2 species of rays I'm talking to you about tonight are similar in some ways, but also very different. White-spotted eagle rays and the pygmy devil ray. The species I'm talking about for our research are based in the Atlantic basin, but there are similar species in the Pacific and the Indian Oceans too. They're similar in that they're both born fairly small, about 40 to 50 centimeters disc width. Where they differ now is eagle rays get about twice as big as devil rays, and eagle rays tend to have more pups, where devil rays will just have 1. But where they really differ, and what I'm going to talk about, is what they eat. Eagle rays are crunchers and they eat hard-shelled prey, and devil rays are slurpers and they eat very small prey, and they have specialized mechanisms in their mouth for doing that. I'm going to start off with our crunchers, our eagle rays. These guys eat hard-shelled prey. Your word of the night is duraphagy, which means crushing prey. We do research at Mote and have research tanks. I'm going to play a short video, so listen to the crunch. And you can see that they spit out the shell parts once they ingest the meaty parts. So our research is having us learn what they eat and what it sounds like when they eat. What we have learned is that when they pick up a clam, it takes them a little longer to eat a clam. So they have to crunch it. All these little red lines here are as they're breaking a clam apart, they're making that clam into smaller pieces and pulling the meat off. When they eat a snail, they're able to do one big crack. It sounds like a big crack. And then that meat just slides right out into their mouth. So we are able to take this and use it in other types of research. Now, one of the reasons people might be like, why is this important? Well, there's a couple reasons we want to understand eagle ray diet. And what I'm going to do is play in the background while I'm talking some research that we've done on what they're eating. And then secondly, how they interact with aquaculture gear that's used when people are trying to clam farms out in the environment. They put them in these bags or they put them under cover netting. And sometimes rays are implicated with getting into these bags. So we have done research in our tanks with different types of gear that aquaculture farmers can use. What works better from keeping a hungry ray out of your bag? As you can see, they often can dig around. They can pull stuff up. They have very strong jaws. You'll see the one on the right there going into our control bin and actually digging the clams out like they would in the wild with them not in the bags. So if you want to learn more about what we've been doing with the eagle rays, we just were on PBS, PBS Changing Seas. So type in PBS, eagle rays, you'll pull it up, cool episode. It's going to show you what we're doing next. What we've been doing the last couple of years is we've been using these really cool suction cup tags on rays with our collaborators at Harbor Brands, Dr. Matt Ajamian and his students. They have audio cameras, video cameras on them, all kinds of things that we can measure their body movement. We're learning all kinds of really cool things. But I want to leave time because I don't want the lightning bolt. I'm going to tell you about our slurpers, our devil rays. These guys are really cool. They have gill plates. The way we catch them is same way we catch eagle rays. We circle them with the net. We bring them up on board our boat. Then we're able to do all kinds of sampling, take fecal swabs and stuff. We also want to see what they might be feeding on. So we do plankton toes out in the water. And this is some of the little stuff we pull up in our plankton toes. We also want to see what's in their gastric content. So we put a little suction cup tube down there and pull it out. And voila, here their stomachs are full of baby shrimp. So these guys are literally sucking and slurping the little tiny shrimps out of the water and concentrating it for food. Oop, there goes. Sorry, that's my alarm. Stop. My timer, I'm trying to get my timer to stop. I don't know how to stop it now. There we go. Oh my gosh. All right, I set my own time so I didn't get the lightning worm. This is my last slide. I want to teach you guys about how to raise awareness. You can spread the word about rays. This is also my opportunity to thank my research colleagues. So thank you very much to everyone for listening. And please visit Mote's website to learn more about rays and our research.
I'm not sure that counts as making it or not, but I gave you a little grace period there for the unexpected alarm.
I know. I didn't know how to turn I timed it so I didn't get the lightning bolt, but thanks, Jim. So I guess I got shocked.
You're close. You're real close.
Okay.
So Kim, when you look at the jaws of like the eagle ray, and they're so flat, right? They don't even look like teeth anymore. When you all have interacted with them, have you ever gotten a nip with those plates or anything like that?
It's funny you should ask that. I just had that happen to me where I actually got my finger smushed a little bit. So we have to be very careful because they do have a very strong bite. I mean, they can literally take a big whelk and crush it. So don't put your hand in the mouth of an eagle ray.
Yeah, strong takeaway for this evening for sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Kim. Kim will be back this evening. If you have questions for Kim about her topic or at eagle rays or any of that good stuff, please do put those questions into the chat. Thank you, Kim. We will see you later. Our next speaker is Makayla Taylor. Makayla is an aquarist, from our warm water fish and invertebrate team, and one of the caretakers that will be shepherding our eagle rays into the new ocean pavilion habitat. Makayla will be sharing a little bit about the role training plays in the care of these animals. Are you ready, Makayla?
Ready, Jim.
All right.
All right, here we go. So I figured I'd keep the good vibes going and keep talking about eagle rays because we love them. I am going to talk about them in an aquarium setting and kind of the techniques that we have used for training of our eagle rays here at Seattle Aquarium. Okay, so little background info. I'm sure you saw on the pre-show slides, the Seattle Aquarium is at the tail end of a expansion project. It's going to be called the Ocean Pavilion. We're really, really excited to get that open later this summer. And what that's going to bring to us is a lot of really cool new tropical species, one of those being our spotted eagle rays. All right, so here's our spotted eagle rays. Rachel, who you'll hear from later, one of our other aquarists, she and I like to call them the boys, because we've got 3 male eagle rays. They're currently being cared for at our offsite animal care center, just awaiting their journey to their new habitat in the Ocean Pavilion. They are the oscillated species of eagle rays, so they're the Pacific species. Kim was working with the Atlantic species, so we've got the Pacific over here. And our age ranges on those guys are about 2 to 7 years old. So why train eagle rays? It kind of sounds like a weird concept if you think about it. Most people think of animal training as like dogs or horses or animals of that nature, but these rays are really intelligent, and it's awesome to get to see them stimulated and using their brains. And also, it helps us help them because it helps us with their daily feedings. It helps us if we ever have to catch these animals up for their routine health procedures for our veterinary team. So it's just a good practice. All right, so one of the first steps that we take is target training. And you can see Rachel there in the picture. So she's got a orange circle target and she's got it in the water. And then in her other hand, she's got some food. So this target is what our eagle rays recognize to come to this part of the habitat and to follow that target. And it just gives them a really good point of reference for where they can come get their meals. And they are very excited about that. So that's very important. All of our sharks and rays here get their own individual targets, so we can keep those feeding stations a little bit separate. That just helps things go smoother. Next, once they have some good consistency with that target, they recognize it, they're coming to it, they're ready, we will hop on in the water with them. So this gives us a really good time to get them desensitized to having humans near them, because that can be a little spooky at first, but we have found that with our guys, they have seemed to enjoy interacting with us in the water. They're very social creatures. They're very social with each other. So it's been super cool to get to interact with them in that way. Next part of the process, we will introduce the stretcher. And it's pictured there. It's that big oval black circle thing. We like to call it the ray tray. So that's pretty fun. So this is really just our safest method for moving these rays for any reason whatsoever. And the big one is going to be our routine animal health exams with our vet team. So seeing the stretcher for the first time in their habitat when it's first introduced can also be a little bit spooky. So we want to get them used to that slowly so that it's not such a scary experience. So we'll have them target and eat their food over that stretcher. And then here is an example of one of our routine animal health exams. And you can see we've got all hands on deck there. Our vet staff is awesome. They really just want to ensure that our animals are all in exceptional health. And this particular vet exam went really, really well. So that was exciting. And so before we even attempt an exam like that, we really want to have adequate training prior to that. That just helps keep the animals calm. It helps keep the humans calm through that whole process. So kind of makes going to the doctor a less scary process. All right, so lastly, I've got a video here. I'm just gonna go ahead and play this. So you can see Rachel's in the water there. We'll have the target over the stretcher and we'll do a little lift. So that'll kind of simulate what it would be like to be caught out. So again, it's just getting them used to that feeling so that it's not so scary when the time comes. And then we've got our other guy right there ready to go. All right, with that, thank you so much. Enjoy this goofy little clip of me and Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks, Makayla. I was super interested. I think it's I don't think people commonly realize that training sharks and rays in aquariums is the norm now, right? It's not an exception.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, so with the targets, is it just shape, or do your rays recognize different colors as well?
That's a great question. I don't have a ton of research on like what their particular range of colors that they can see. But I think it does make a difference for sure. We can see that this group of animals will come to this shape and color, and this group of animals will come to this shape and color. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your talk. And I know there are going to be a ton of questions coming in from the chat, and also more I know that we'll pull together for the Q&A. So Makayla will be joined during the Q&A by her colleague, Rachel, also from our warm water fish team. So we'll see both Makayla and Rachel a little bit later. Our next speaker is Janis Argeswara. Janis is a researcher with the Marine Megafauna Foundation working in Indonesia, where she leads several projects on manta rays and sea turtles. Tonight, she'll be telling us more about the manta rays off the island of Nusa Penida in Bali. Are you ready, Janis?
I'm good.
Slides look great.
Okay, cool. Hey everyone, my name is Janis, and today I'll be talking a little bit about the manta rays of Nusa Penida in Bali, Indonesia. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about reef manta rays, which are the second largest species of ray in the world. Reef manta rays can grow up to 3 to 5 meters from wingtip to wingtip, so they're massive. And they're mainly found in subtropical and tropical waters, particularly in the coastal areas. Now, reef manta rays are currently classified as vulnerable to extinction by the IUCN Red List. Now, how humans have fingerprints to identify one individual with the other. Manta rays have what we call belly prints. So belly prints are basically permanent pattern on their belly side that distinguishes one individual with the other. So here, as you can see in the first row, we have cauliflower, my favorite manta. She has a shark bite, and her pattern from the right and the left picture, they're taken at 2 different times, but as you can see, it stays the same. And so that's why we can use it as identification. And the second row, we have 3 puffs, and 3 puffs have a very different identification pattern than cauliflower. So that's how we identify one individual with the other. Now, using photo identification and their belly prints, we're able to identify over 3,000 manta rays in MMF study sites in Indonesia. And specifically in Nusa Lembongan and Nusa Penida, on your bottom left, we have identified over 840 individuals so far. Now, specifically on manta rays in Nusa Penida, my previous team leader, Dr. Elisa Germanov, she did her Ph.D. on manta rays in Nusa Penida, and her Ph.D. found that there are 2 main sites where manta rays are found in Nusa Penida. We have Manta Bay, where a majority of sightings are mainly smaller and juvenile manta rays. And so it's been classified as a feeding ground and a potential nursery ground. And then in Manta Point, which is about 12 kilometers away from Manta Bay, it is mainly used as a cleaning station and an area for reproductive activities, where most of the manta rays that's found there are mainly mature females and males. That's pretty cool how in Nusa Penida we have these 2 sites that are used very differently from one another. If any of you guys are geeks and want to read more about this finding, feel free to screenshot this paper by Dr. Elisa Germanov. Now, from the past 11 years of data, we're able to find our top five most recited individuals. The highest individual is Little Nipper, who has been cited more than 100 times since 2012. Then we have Cauliflower, Black Clam, Whale, and Dolly Boy. So knowing that these 5 individuals, and obviously there's more individuals that come very often to Nusa Penida, makes us understand that Nusa Penida is indeed an important habitat for these species. Now, unfortunately, like other sites, there are always threats to important conservation habitats, and one of them in Nusa Penida is unsustainable tourism. Here you can see the number of boats, specifically in Manta Point. it has been overall increasing, particularly after the COVID-19 event. And the thing is, unsustainable tourism is not good for the manta rays, but also can be very uncomfortable for snorkelers and divers. For example, like this video I found on TikTok. So can you imagine having that many people on top and then like just one or two manta rays below? That is not comfortable and not sustainable at all. So to end the slides, I want to let you know about mantamatcher.org, which is a global manta ray database. Basically, if you have a camera and you like snorkeling or scuba diving with manta rays, click submit and upload your picture to mantamatcher.org, where researchers will identify the belly prints of the manta rays that you submitted. And once it's identified, each manta ray will have kind of like their own profile page where you can see who it is, how many times they've been seen, where they've been seen, and whether they've been pregnant or not for the females. So yeah, this is what we call citizen science, and this really helps with our research. So to end the slides, thank you so much. And this is our socials. And yeah, I hope I didn't talk too fast. Thanks, Jim.
Oh, Janis, that was great. The manta. So we were in Bali last fall, doing some work for the Ocean Pavilion, and we didn't quite get out to Manta Point because you got just washed out with the weather. But this idea that people want to see live animals is of course good. We love that idea, and it seems like in some cases we could potentially be loving them to death. Are you aware of any efforts where people are trying to understand and control the amount of tourists that engage in any particular dive site?
Yeah, so we do have an ongoing observation of the things. We keep notes on how many boats are there, how many manta rays are there. We are working on doing analyses on seeing whether the amount of boats every year has an impact to the manta ray sightings. So that is one thing that we're kind of trying to work on right now. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there is some sort of connectedness to it, but yeah, we'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Janis. Janis, of course, will be back for the Q&A. So if you have questions or comments around Janis's manta ray research, please do put those into the chat. Our next speaker is Trisha Gupta. Trish is a marine conservation scientist and Ph.D. candidate at the University of Oxford. Trish is working on sustainable fishing and conservation issues surrounding sharks and rays in India. This evening, she'll be sharing a little bit about a fascinating but highly threatened group of rays, the rhino rays. Are you ready to tell us more, Trish?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, and your slides look great.
Okay, great. Yeah, I guess I'll get started then. Thank you so much for having me here and giving me a chance to speak about some of my favorite species. So I'm sure all of you must be familiar with this animal, which is of course the rhino that you see on land. But today I'm going to introduce you to what I think is an even more fascinating group of species called the rhino rays that are found underwater. And rhino rays are basically a group of species that are somewhat in between sharks and rays in terms of their evolution. And they're actually quite a diverse and widespread species group found all across the world, especially in tropical and subtropical waters. But despite being so widespread, they tend to be a bit overlooked, with their more charismatic cousins, the sharks, receiving a lot more attention. So if any of you have ever seen a rhino ray or interacted with one, I would love to hear about it, so please share your story in the chat. Rhino rays, like many other ray species, are bottom dwellings, so they live near the seafloor, and their bodies do show a lot of adaptations to life on the seafloor, one of them being some really good camouflage. So as you can see from this little individual here, he's quite sand colored, and once they get onto the seafloor, it's actually really difficult to spot them. Unfortunately, rhino rays are highly threatened, similar to the mantas and the eagle rays that the other speakers were just talking about. And they're actually really facing the risk of extinction, even among sharks and rays. with most species classified as critically endangered. And there is a real risk that these might disappear from our waters in the near future if nothing is done about it. Overfishing is definitely the main threat to these species. They can sometimes be caught in quite large numbers. And what makes it even more challenging is that rhino rays tend to be found and live in very near-shore coastal waters, where you also have a lot of human activity. So, just as an example, this is from one of my field sites in India, in Goa, where in the same nearshore region, you have small scale fishing vessels, large scale fishing vessels, as well as a lot of human activities like tourism that are operating. And all of these activities do threaten coastal species like rhino rays. So, what can we do about it? At this point, I'm going to quickly introduce you to my main study species, which are the wide-nosed guitarfish, which is basically a type of rhino ray. And what's really interesting about these species is that they display this really unique and fascinating behavior where the young ones, the pups, tend to come close to shore, especially at night. So you can see them swimming in with the waves and swimming back, even when you're just standing on the beach. So I have a little video here that can hopefully show this further. So if you look closely, you can spot some of them there, right there, there as well. So we use a torch for our surveys because obviously it's dark. And yeah, it's really cool behavior. This hasn't really been studied before very well, and we don't know why they're coming so close to shore like this. So that's what my team and I investigated in some of our study sites in India. And what we actually found is that some of these sites may be serving as nursery grounds where young rays, the pups, spend up to 1 year of their lives just growing up in these sheltered regions before they move into further deeper waters. But more importantly, we've been working with local communities because in the end of the day, conservation is about people. And if you want to conserve or save a species, you need to work with the local communities that are living next to them and interacting with them on a daily basis. And this is especially true for species like rhino rays that are so understudied in India that local communities actually hold the best knowledge for these species, given that they're interacting with them regularly and they also have traditional knowledge that's been passed down through generations. So we interviewed members of the local community to document their knowledge of these threatened species and to also understand how and why they fish them and use them so we can develop conservation measures. And what our research has found is that live release might actually be the most effective conservation measure for rhino ray species. So that's what we then focused on through various outreach programs, including we created a short film in the local language that was shared and distributed amongst the local community that encouraged them to put these species back into the water when they were caught accidentally in their nets. And we have seen some signs of success with reports of fishers putting these species back into the water as a result of our outreach. And while these are very small steps in the right direction, I think it is a sign of hope for these species. So I'm going to just end on this positive note. Thank you so much to my funders, my research team, to the Seattle Aquarium, of course, and to all of you for coming out here. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trisha. That's, you were right on the, but you did a really good job. Live release. I know that some sharks do really well with live release. Some sharks don't do well with live release. Has there been any studies to understand how well the animals do after being sort of caught and handled and then sent back to the wild?
Yeah, there's not been much research on this so far. That's a really good question. But we do see that rhino rays, as compared to many other fish species, tend to survive for a really long time outside of water. I've seen them live for even 3 to 4 hours after they've been caught and brought out of the water. And fishermen claim that they can even live for 12 hours outside of water. But of course, we don't know what this means in terms of their physiology and whether they're actually still able to survive when put back in. So there needs to be more research on that. But at least externally, they do seem to survive and swim back and seem quite hardy. So I think it does seem to be a promising strategy for their conservation.
Cool. Well, thank you, Trish. Trisha will be back for the Q&A section. So again, you know the drill. Put your questions into the chat and we'll bring those forward at the end of the evening. Our final speaker for this program will be Steve Kessel. Steve is the Director of Marine Research at the John G. Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. Shedd's programs focus on the economically important species in the Bahamas and the Caribbean, but tonight, Steve is going to share a little bit about a new project embarked upon by a group of aquariums and conservation partners to restore populations of another extremely threatened species, the bowmouth guitarfish. Steve, are you ready to bring us home?
Already.
All right, your slides look great.
Thank you very much. So thank you all for being here. Today I'm going to talk about one of the most critically endangered species on the planet, the bowmouth guitarfish, aka the shark ray. Now, to understand the plight of the bowmouth guitarfish, we're going to have to go back to the focus of Trisha's talk, the rhino rays. Let's see if I can get, here we go. So rhino rays comprise 67 elazobranch species. 76.1% are categorized by the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species as either vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. And this is mainly due to their very high value fins. So they're very commonly targeted and retained as bycatch. And this makes them the most threatened marine taxa in the world. If we break down that group a little further, we have the sawfishes, the wedgefish, the giant guitarfishes, the guitarfishes, and the banjo rays. And you can see that these three groups to the left-hand side of the screen, all but one of these species is critically endangered. And bowmouth guitarfish fall within this group, the wedgefishes or the rhinidae. Bowmouth guitarfish are distributed across the Indian Ocean, Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, Indo-Pacific, and Western Pacific Ocean. But their populations in the wild have declined by over 80%, so it's very uncommon to see them in the wild. They're mainly recorded at fishing markets. In addition to this, there was a recent study that came out earlier this year that looked at evolutionary distinct and globally endangered species. And these are very important evolutionary as they are needed to maintain biodiversity capacity for adaptation for things to climate change, ecosystem productivity, and in turn, human well-being. And this study found that of the top 25, bowmouth guitarfish were considered to be the most evolutionary distinct, critically endangered jawed vertebrate on the planet. Now, that's not just fish, that's all vertebrates, both terrestrial and aquatic. And this identifies the bowmouth guitarfish as one of the highest priorities for species-focused conservation. So who's going to take up that mantle? Well, last year in November, Shedd Aquarium hosted a group of delegates from 20 organizations in 8 countries in Chicago, Illinois, to come up with a conservation action plan for the species. As you can see here, Seattle Aquarium was one of those member organizations. And they developed this group called Shark Ray 360. Shark Ray 360 is intended to be a group of experts from around the world that are focused on both managing populations in human care to sustain against extinction, and also to increase our understanding and conservation measures of the species in the wild. Now, there's a series of sub-working groups within the broader Shark Ray 360 group. I'm going to focus on a few of those priorities that those working groups are focusing on. The first, and these ones are for human care and managed populations, are breeding and reproduction. This is important for understanding life history, but also our ability to breed and raise these animals in human care with the potential of reintroducing them into the wild in the future for bolstering wild populations that have been heavily depleted. Also, understanding globally, in a globally coordinated effort, the genetic diversity of that managed population so that we are sure we're representing the various different genetic populations in the wild. Another one is health and veterinary care to better increase the welfare of the animals, and also what these animals in human care can teach us about those in the wild, since the ones in the wild are so difficult to encounter. In terms of our wild priorities, we found several data gaps that we are focusing on filling these data gaps with data and knowledge. First being spatial ecology. We know next to nothing, well, we know nothing about how these animals move in the wild. We have zero data on that. Again, population genetics. What is the landscape throughout the different regions these animals occur, and how does this relate to potential recovery? What is their wild diet, and how does this relate to what we are feeding them in human care? And also other life history parameters like age and growth in the wild, as it's important to compare these to animals managed in human care. And all this information we hope can provide increased management and conservation for wild populations. Now, I'm going to end very quickly on this really cute video. This is 9 pups that are all siblings that were rescued from the fisheries in Taiwan. And these all now reside in various aquariums around the United States. And it was this event and these individuals that really spurred that initial workshop that resulted in the development of Shark Ray 360. And we really hope, it's still very young, but we really hope that Shark Ray 360 can provide the species-focused conservation these very evolutionarily distinct and cool animals deserve to help them thrive long into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So the bowmouth is one of the most interesting animals. And sometimes, they call them shark rays and bowmouth. They have all sorts of different names because they're just sort of an odd kind of hybrid looking animal. But this is an incredibly endangered animal. So that's also not terribly uncommon in aquariums. Do you know how many facilities off the top of your head that are showing bowmouth guitarfish?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I was looking for that information today. That would be more on the husbandry side, and I'm more on the wild population side. I know it's a fair few, and it's many different countries are hosting them. One of the things that Shark Ray 360 is doing a proper audit to establish how many facilities do have them, and then having them join in with our program to help contribute data to increase our understanding of the species. But it's a lot.
Okay. Well, great, Steve. This time, Steve is not going to go anywhere. We're going to bring all of our speakers back to the stage for my favorite part of the evening, which is our Q&A. So this is your opportunity to ask a question. So keep dropping those into the chat. We've seen a bunch. We're going to bring some of those forward, but you can continue to ask questions in the chat all the way through to the end of the program. But before I go to the questions from our audience, do any of you all have questions for each other?
I do. I have a question for Makayla. I was curious, you've started feeding the rays and training the rays. Do you find that they have a preference for what you're feeding them? They are more come up to the trainer stretcher?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like maybe their favorite food item that we feed them is shrimp. They go crazy for shrimp. It's definitely one of their favorites. We also feed them whole clams that they can crunch. We can hear them crunching it. So I really loved your video of the crunch noise. That was awesome.
Hey, so there's a question from the audience that I think is kind of related to this. So I want to jump into that. So Rachel, the audience is curious, of the 3 boys, do they have distinct personalities? And does that play into how you train them? Ooh, I don't think we have your audio, Rachel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
So sorry. But yes, 100%. Our 3 boys have different personalities. They do range in age, so that kind of affects, I think, their personality a little bit. Our 2 older boys are 7 and 5, I believe. Those 2 have very almost opposite personalities, in my opinion. The younger one, the 5-year-old, he is definitely more shy, has a little bit more of a docile personality, but the older one, he definitely has a little bit more dominance and a little bit more spunk and edge to him. And the youngest one, our very youngest baby, he is definitely learning from them and he's growing his personality and kind of asserting his dominance and very food motivated. So we kind of use those personalities to target train and structure train them, and kind of use different techniques to kind of, and also use their favorite food items to kind of help with all of that. So
sometimes people struggle to individualize animals, right? They think of all the eagle rays, they think of all the manta rays, but your work as a trainer really focuses on getting to know each individual animal. And Janis, your work really has a lot to do with individual animals. And you can recognize, you said there were hundreds in the database. Do divers also notice differences in the personalities of those individual animals? Are some more shy around the boats and the divers? Are some a little bit more gregarious?
I think so. individually, a lot of people don't realize, how each manta ray have their own personality, but a lot of the behavior that we see is really determined by the environment. Like a lot of the manta rays in Nusa Penida, they're used to divers, so they're not as shy as you would think they'd be. But if you were to go to areas where there's not a lot of divers, then they would, you see bubbles and then they just swim away.
So you think some of that is conditioning just because they're seeing divers so much that they become a little more used to their presence?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Steve, did I see that you had a question as well?
Yes, I did actually. It's for Trisha, since we are talking about similar animals. Well, one of the, I'd say the most comprehensive paper I have found on bowmouth guitarfish in the wild, it was largely based on fish market data, was from India. So I'm wondering, in your experiences there with the fishermen, have you encountered any live bowmouth amongst those animals?
Live, no, sadly. Yeah, I've seen a few bowmouth guitarfish, both small and large, in some of the areas that I worked in, but they've always been dead. And they've always been sold for a very small amount of money, so they don't seem to be very preferred, either for consumption or for any other purpose. So, like a really large adult bowmouth guitarfish that must have been close to 100 kilos was sold for like very little amount of money. So it was quite sad and yeah, not very worth it overall. But I haven't seen any live ones so far.
Thank you.
Kim, you had touched on it at the end of your talk about the live captures that you all do with the devil rays, and I'm assuming with eagle rays as well. And I'm just sort of thinking that kind of comparing and contrasting the procedure that Makayla was describing in her talk as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about how, the live capture goes with those animals?
Sure. Yeah. So we, with the rays that we're catching, we're sight looking for them, and then setting a circular seine net, like a corral around them, different than sometimes researchers will use gill nets, for instance, and that just, blindly catches animals in more turbid water. But so once we have them in a compass, we can have divers go in with like we call it big dog catcher nets to scoop them up and swim them back to the boat. And we have like a crane, especially for our bigger eagle rays, to like lift them and bring them in a kind of a small tank that we have on boat that we keep oxygenated water in. And that just allows us to keep them really healthy. And, as we're, tagging them or checking for pit tags or taking a blood sample, keep them super robust and healthy and tag them and then release them.
Yeah. And so it's the things that y'all are doing, Makayla, are specifically to try to reduce those stress levels, right? So that the animal is not as, freaked out by the, sort of any kind of, like if you're doing a blood draw or if you're putting them in the sling, some of that is specifically to help with their stress. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kim is working with animals in the wild, and we're working with ones that see us every day. So it is a little bit easier for us to employ those kind of techniques, but it definitely helps make it become like more of a routine. Like you're just going to the doctor for your checkup and you're going to go right back into your home and everything's going to be fine kind of thing. But oxygenated water is definitely a big one for us for reducing those stress levels and keeping them healthy throughout that process.
So the intelligence of these animals is something that's come up a couple of times in the chat. Obviously, they need to be smart to be able to figure out to be trained. Do y'all have some other ideas about how smart rays of various species might be, and how would you be able to tell? Like someone had asked, can they solve puzzles like an octopus can, or like what would be some kind of markers that you would judge as saying, yeah, the animal's a little smarter than I thought they were?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I know that manta rays are currently classified as like the most smartest fish. Obviously probably not as smart as like marine mammals, but as fish, they have the biggest brain to body ratio of any fish.
Okay.
So that's kind of really interesting, just seeing how big of their brain is in comparison to their body. If you compare it with like whale sharks,
So whale sharks, a little bit more lumbering, kind of happy-go-lucky, but the manta rays got a larger brained about it. I can see that.
Yeah, manta rays are really, really curious. Like if you go swimming with them, they would actually come up to you, and just like, what's this animal doing here? Yeah.
That's something another person asked as well, like that. So you're saying that some manta rays, at least, not only have gotten conditioned to divers, but are curious as well, and so divers can get quite close to them. Is that relatively common? And is there, again, do the dive operations help people do that responsibly?
So we do have the codes of conduct. So basically, kind of tells you how to behave when you encounter not just manta rays, but just marine megafauna in general. And for manta rays, we have a distance of at least 3 to 5 meters away from the manta rays. So that's what we can control. When we swim towards a manta ray, we have to know the distance. But like I said, manta rays are really, really curious. So they might just come swim up to you and be right in front of your face. And as long as you don't touch them, and you want to let them control the interaction when you're underwater. I mean, I've had manta rays use me or use other divers as like a challenge when they're doing their mating train. So that was really interesting because they see as like, oh, it's just something in the water. I'm going to use them as a challenge during my mating training. So that was really interesting.
So say more about that. What does it mean for you to be challenged by a manta ray in a mating ritual?
So I'm sorry, maybe I worded it wrong, but I'm kind of like one of the. So okay, I need to explain. When they're mating, the female is in the front, and she kind of lures all the males to follow her, and this can take up to like 2 days, and basically the male who can keep up with her the longest is the one. And so she has to make it difficult for all these other males. So she has to swim through a lot of hoops and go like topsy-turvy. And so I remember I was with my SMB just right on the surface. And what she did was she passed by me and my buddy just going around with us. And I was scared, I was scared that she might get entangled with the SMB line. So I just like stayed still. But it was really interesting because not just me, but a lot of my friends have been in that position as well, where the manta rays, the female, uses divers as, well, that's one thing I can put the males through, something like that.
That sounds like quite an experience. Yeah, and it definitely sounds like a good indicator of how smart those animals are.
For sure.
Steve and Trisha, you all are talking about a group of animals that are incredibly endangered, among the most endangered vertebrates, as you pointed out, Steve, in the world. Forget the ocean. Someone was curious about the breeding program with the bowmouth guitarfish, and I know it's still in its nascent stages, but there's been relatively successful breeding of those animals in human care settings. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as you said, it's kind of in its infancy. It's a part of the broader Shark Ray 360 program, and really the theory is based on a different program that we are working with. Shed Aquarium and Seattle Aquarium are part of something called the STAR program, which is looking to reintroduce zebra sharks, or zebra sharks. Sorry, this is a US platform, or Indonesia, or leopard sharks if you're in different parts of the world. Anyway, that species, the breeding processes and in terms of working with them in aquariums are very well established, and we have been breeding zebra sharks in human care for decades now, and they're distributed around many aquariums. And that proof of concept led to a program called STAR, where we are now reintroducing them into an area in Indonesia where they have previously fished to almost local extinction, but is now protected. So the question is, could we do the same thing with a very critically endangered species, zebra sharks being endangered, bowmouths being critically endangered? And could this be an option for us? Now, a big part of this program is to explore that potential. But the difference between a bowmouth guitarfish and a zebra shark is zebra sharks are egg layers. It's very easy for us to transport fertilized eggs. It's a lot harder to transport live young. So we might look at other interventions, but in order to even explore this possibility, whether we're rearing young locally, or here's something with it, whether we're rearing young locally on site, it may be in the area we're going to release them, or breeding them in aquaria. We're not as far along with the breeding biology of the bowmouth in human care. So there's a lot of work to be done on that. Some aquariums have had success breeding them, but once they are born, the next step is to try and raise them up into maturity. And we don't know enough about the species, both in human care and the wild, and the reproduction in the wild, to be at that stage yet. There's an aquarium. Some of the aquariums in Asia have had better success than the aquariums in the US, but we're all now pulling resources and knowledge to try and get over that next step and see if that's even feasible for this species.
Speaking of the sort of young animals, Trisha, you had mentioned the young rhino rays sort of darting through the surf like that. Have you all thought more about what they might be doing there? Is there something they're attracted to, lights from the shoreline or the prey it's there, or is it something to do with the shallowness of the water? It keeps them safe from predators. What do you think is going on with that behavior?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That is a good question, and that is what we were trying to figure out through some of our work. It's hard to say, but we don't think that it's the lights per se, because they don't seem to be responding to the light or either attracted to it or repelled by it. But we do think that they're coming that close to shore to feed potentially, because while I haven't seen it myself, but stories from fishers have said that they've seen them feed and eat on the little animals that live in the seafloor at the waterline, like the tiny clams and crabs. And as you said, yeah, they're probably likely getting protection from predators as well. So that's what led us to suspect that these might be serving as nursery grounds, especially since we've been seeing rays sometimes in the hundreds in a single night on a single beach. So that's quite a large number for a critically endangered species, which is exciting. But yeah, it's still very unclear why they're doing this behavior, but likely for food as well as protection.
Yeah, sharks are we always talk about sharks as being so mysterious and there's so much to know, but rays, it feels like we're scratching the surface on a lot of the biology and ecology for a lot of these species. And so it's a fertile ground for someone who's interested in that kind of biology to get in there and be really active and make a difference as a researcher. So Rachel, we got a question here about some of our audience who've seen videos of eagle rays and other rays jumping actually quite far out of the water. Do you all take precautions to make sure that the animals in our care aren't jumping out of the exhibits?
Yeah, actually, like we have jump guards, especially at our animal care center. And then we also, for our ocean pavilion, we have our water level definitely lower. Our eagle rays are basically our only potential jumpers, but luckily they don't. Ours have not exhibited jumping high heights, so luckily we don't foresee any problems. But yeah, we have safeguards in check just in case that happens.
And this is a question for anybody. What do you all know the behavior that's associated? I think, like, why are they jumping?
Well, I can tell you from the eagle rays that we see here that we've actually captured eagle rays jumping out of the water, a photo, and you can see the remoras on them. So we think they jump to rid themselves of remoras, and some of the ones we catch are just covered in remora scars. Like remoras suck the skin right off the rays and leave some bloody patches, believe it or not. They leave markable marks on the rays, both devil rays and eagle rays, and they both jump. I mean, we've also seen eagle rays jump to escape hammerhead sharks. So we actually had we saw a predation attempt of a hammerhead come in, and the eagle ray pup was jumping back and forth, and then slowly that shark consumed that ray. So they definitely try to get away from sharks, and that's one of their mechanisms, is they can jump out of the water. So I'd say ridding themselves of remoras and escaping predation are two reasons they would jump.
I think I've also read mobula rays in like the Sea of Cortez, and that jumping as a demonstration of fitness, kind of like the boys chasing the female manta. Have you all seen anything like that as well?
I've definitely, well, I haven't seen it, but I've had friends who saw a manta kind of breaching. We call them breaching. And I think based from what I've read, a lot of it are assumed to be, are hypothesized to be related to reproductive, yeah, like showing off their fitness, showing off to their potential mates of how I don't know how high they can jump. I'm not sure, but just
Yeah. How big a noise, how high a jump, like whatever it is.
yeah.
So I've got a toss-up question from Holmes, age 5. What is the fastest ray? Fastest ray.
I'm not sure if we know that. Maybe we should arrange a race.
That would be amazing.
Like a snail race.
We know the fastest shark, but I don't think we know the fastest ray, and that's disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, those mobular rays go like pretty darn fast, or they're turning, their ability to turn and fast is way exceeds the eagle rays that we've worked with. But I don't know. I'm thinking with the more shark-like rays, maybe because their body form.
Like anything that the water has to be generating some speed, right?
Yeah.
I assume it would be one of the pelagic rays, but yeah, I guess we don't really know.
Holmes has stumped the panel.
But also,
Good question.
planted the seed.
All right. Well, there's a lot of interest in you know the sharks, skates, rays, like all of these animals have just a ton of interest and a ton of diversity, and obviously a lot of conservation concerns. When you all are looking at some of the conservation questions that you're looking at, do you see anything that, you know, sometimes the conservation question can kind of be a dire one. Do you see any work out there, any particular communities or populations that make you feel hopeful about the future for rays?
I can maybe quickly say that I know of some work in Indonesia by a few colleagues who are again working with local fishing communities on both sharks and rays to try and incentivize them to either not catch these species or release them live if they're caught accidentally. And while it's still in the early stages, it seems to be going well so far. They've had over 1,000 releases of wedgefish and as well of hammerhead sharks, and I think it's quite a positive sign. At least I feel like there's a ray of hope, if I can say that, for their conservation.
We'll allow that. Any other bright spots for folks?
I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge there are a lot of bright spots out there, even for really critically endangered species like the bowmouth guitarfish. There are reports of aggregations occurring in places like Djibouti. You know, they are a very widespread animal. It's just a lot of these locations are very remote and we don't have a good handle on them, largely because of the distribution of conservation funding that has occurred and where that's led to research being done. So I think focusing our attention in the future in some of these more remote, under-resourced regions is going to highlight some of these more bright spots and tell us where we need to focus our area. And I thought Trisha's talk was an example where she was saying her work is leading to behavioral change. I think that's exactly the kind of thing we need to be doing, and seeing that behavioral change and generational change is going to be very important.
Yeah, I love to see all the work that's happening in the field. I love hearing from y'all. Hopefully places like aquariums, programs like this, who can bring attention to these animals and attention to some of the challenges they're facing and some of the opportunities for conservation can help point us in the right direction. Well, that is the time that we have for this evening. I want to say thank you again to our speakers. You were all amazing, and maybe we could drop some applause emoji in the chat. I know if we were all in person, you would get a thunderous round of applause and a standing ovation for sure. Now, this is the final program of season 4, which saw us explore ocean tech, whisked us away to the Coral Triangle, and investigated captivating creatures like the octopuses and rays. And remember, you can revisit any of these talks on our YouTube channel or at the Aquarium website, where you can rewatch past seasons and keep up to date on what's coming next. We're also looking for your feedback. So help us shape season 5 by filling out the survey that is hiding behind this QR code. You can scan the QR code or you can click the link that's in the chat. We can already share that season 5 will kick off with an old school icon, the salmon. So season 5 launches on November 14th with a program on salmon. Now, if you enjoyed tonight's free science event, please consider a donation to help keep programs like Lightning Talks free and accessible for all. Visit the Lightning Talks homepage on our website and find links to all previous programs. And you can also submit ideas for future topics and speakers. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.